So get this kind of set up in here. Scale a little bit. Now what I want to do is inside of my image overlay little application, I'm going to come in here and say click through, just so that while I'm using this I can still get back to the back part of my interface and not have to worry about that. So this is, now remember, this is not a part of Substance. This is another program that I'm using on top of it to just display my reference images. So I've got this set up. So first thing I'm going to try to do is try to get the actual surface detail of this denim, because the color is very simple to be able to pull off. I want to get the surface detail first. So one of the things I start looking at when I do my stuff is I look at the underlying texture. So I look at the underlying, what makes up this kind of material. So I know that it's a weave. I know it's weaved together kind of. So I kind of start looking through my weaves. I can just come in here and I can grab a weave. So I'll just grab like this weave 2 and drop it here. And then looking at it, I can see this is like an interlocking pattern of almost like woven cotton. And I know this kind of gives me a look of what I want. So I can start with this. So I'm going to say the weave is sitting right here. So I've got the weave. And I know this by itself is not going to give me this particular texture. The other thing is that my tiling for this is right now just at 1. So I'm going to bump my tiling up and tile it a couple times, so I can start to see I've got a tighter kind of gridded out texture going on here. Now the other thing that you'll notice is my texture is currently at 256, which is pretty low res. So for this, I'm going to turn up the output size. So I'm going to go up size. Let's say we do it at 1024. So there it is at 1024, and we will look at this at 1:1. We can fit the screen, or here's 1:1. So that's what my weave currently looks like, which looks okay. So what I want to do now is, I know this weave by itself is not going to give me the pattern that I want. Now I might even change this up from the last time I made this shader, because this is the one thing that's really cool about Substance, is that you can make, you know, different shaders and make different changes. So I'm going to bring in this mesh 1, and I've got this mesh, and it's kind of cool because it's got like this kind of checkered weave, and it looks kind of like these lines that are kind of running through here, for me at least. So I'm going to turn my tiling up like really high. Now you can override this. You can type in something higher than what the value is. So I can do 20 by 20. And you can keep going up with this. So this is kind of that thing set up right there. Now you also have random seeding. You have random seed. And then you can also change one of these to be different than the other. So I could do something like this. And kind of, so you can play with this and kind of get this, you know, change the output size of it if you choose to. Now, what I would rather do, just so I can, so I've got these two sitting right here. So to get some kind of weave together pattern, I'm going to use my blend node. I'm going to turn back on my graphs in here, so this is just so we get used to doing this. So BLD is my blend. So I've got a blend node. Now what you'll notice about my blend node is that you have got this orange and this gray little circle. Now the way these blend nodes work, you have to use one or the other. So I can't have a color image going in one and then a grayscale image going in the other. It will not calculate. So either you have to convert a grayscale image to appear as though it's color, and you can do that with a gradient map. So you can see right here, the gradient map takes a grayscale image and then outputs color on the other side. Or you can take a color image and turn it grayscale. So actually here's gray. So you can see right here I could go color input and then grayscale output if that's what you choose to do. I'm just going to use this, so when I do that, you'll see the output for this turns to grayscale. So the only thing I can output out of this is grayscale alphas at this point. So I've got these two sitting in this blend node. So let's look at how this blend actually does. So I've got a foreground and a background. So this is the foreground, this is the background image, and then I have an opacity image, which can actually be used as a mask between both of the images. So you could take three grayscale images and use them together to generate a brand new texture. So I'm going to double click on my blend to make sure my blend is what's loaded up here in my 2D viewer. So my 2D viewer right now is showing my blend, blend node, and so there's my blend node right now. And right now you'll see my blend node is set to 256, so it's outputting 256. So I could go ahead and say that this is going to be, you know, I could come in here and say that this is going to be absolute, or however I want this to be. What I'm going to end up doing is just putting in my value. I'm going to output this to 2048, so I have a really big texture. So I'm going to blend out at 2048. Now the other thing about and I'm going to turn on a little bit of alpha on this so we can kind of see through it. There we go. So the thing about this is that I have opacity, so I can change the opacity of my blend node, and you'll see when I change the opacity, I can see the two kind of blended together. That's not really what I want. I really want them to blend a different way. So I can do like change my blending mode and say add linear dodge. So now I've got a more interesting, more complicated texture that's being generated off of these two. I could do subtract. I could do multiply and multiply the two together. I could do add sub. I could lighten them. So I think I might actually lighten them. I think I like the way the lighten looks together. But I still want to add something, because I got a weave kind of going there. I got this intricate weave pattern happening in there, which I kind of like. I'm going to turn up the resolution of this guy so it's not too low. And actually, let's turn on information and say display timings, and give it a second. Nothing's connected yet, so it's not rendering out timings yet. So I don't want this at 4096. I want this at 1024. Actually 2048. There we go. So it's showing me right now this is taking 1.3 milliseconds to generate this blend. So now I could use another grayscale over here. So I'm going to look at something like, let's get a noise. So I'm going to get a noise. Give me some random noise. And I'm just going to use probably, let's say I use, there should be a dirt in here. I think there's a dirt. There we go. So I've got some dirts in here. So I'm going to use like this dirt 1. Now if I bring this and bring it into this shader right into this texture right here, what you'll see that happens is the dirt starts to act as the mask between the two layers. So I can come in here and do dirt and then mask those off. But what I want to actually do is I want to have this by itself. So these two are blended. I'm gonna get another blend node and then bring this in here, and I will say this will be the background, and then I'm gonna use this other dirt over here to be the foreground, and then I'm gonna go to this blend, and let's change this to maybe, let's see, no, I don't like any of those. So let's zoom out some and see what this is doing. Nope, I don't think that's giving me enough of a, that's just a switch node. So let's say we're getting a subtract going on in here. I think this is way too small because it's only 256. So let's up its, let's actually go back to this and up its value. Let's say 1024 maybe, by 1024. And then go back to this blend node and look at it. So this blend's kind of there. I want to really push this blend, this dirt really high. So I'm going to use a brand new node we haven't used yet, which is my 2D transform node. And I'm just gonna come in here and just hit spacebar because I'm just kind of used to doing the spacebar thing. So spacebar brings up the same thing that's up here. So you can get used to either one way you want to work. So I'm gonna say transform 2D. In the transform 2D, I'm gonna take this and bring this to the input, and then take this to the output. So what this transform 2D node allows me to do is it does something that's really cool. So over here, and I'm just gonna move this out of the way for just a little bit. So, well, let's move it. Let's actually move it up over here because I don't really need to see a lot of this stuff over here. There we go. I think that's a good place for it. Because I don't really need that stuff over there. And now I'll set it back to click through. Okay. So what this 2D node does is actually pretty ingenious. Is that it basically takes this and I can either divide or multiply my image, or I can divide it, which is going to increase its scaling. So what's nice is that you can see now I've got way more scaling over this, and I can go up one more and then go back and look at this, and then I've got this kind of blotchiness happening everywhere. So it's really good. That's really what it's good for, is being able to get that kind of repeating pattern. And you can do this and do horizontal mirroring, do vertical mirroring. You know, you can set the offset with this. You can do a lot of things with this. And you can change the MIP mapping value of it. Right now, MIP mapping is set to automatic, and MIP mapping is many in a small space. So with textures, you can do MIP maps, and that's something. It's a technique that's been used for a very long time, and it will probably always be used. Because at far distances, you do not need the same amount of resolution as you do at up close distances. So it makes no sense to have a 2048 texture. Actually, it looks worse. Having a really high res texture on something that's really far away actually makes the object look worse because it has so much detail on it. Because our eyes in real life, that's kind of how our eyes work. When we're far away from something, we can't see the detail on it. So we kind of see shapes and, you know, maybe a little bit of color variations and things like that. And when we get closer to it, then we can inspect the detail of it. Well, the game engine works the same way. The game engine will use lower res textures at far distances, and as you get close to them, you'll get higher res images. Sometimes that ends up being pop-in for some games. You'll have, like, you know, a texture will pop in on you, but it's kind of the same type of thing. So I want to start seeing some of this on my actual model. So I'm just going to select all of these guys, bring them down here, and for the normal, I'm going to connect it to my normal because I want to use these to actually give me my normal texture anyway. So I'm going to click here and get norm. There's my normal, and you can see a grayscale goes in on one side, and there's my normal map, and then a color map comes out on the other side, and that connects to my normal. And if I look at this, it's going to be hard to see because I don't have any shading information on it right now, but you can see that my normal map is actually working on here, and it looks pretty darn good. I like it. Now the other thing I might do is I might come in here and set a 2D transform node in between these two. So you can see I've got a 2D transform node in here so that I can actually bump up that without having to go back and do it at the base level. Now, one reason why you might want to do this is you can use relatively low textures on these guys because they don't need really high texture, and then be able to get out more than you really put into it by using a 2D texture node. Now, the other thing about it is that the 2D texture node is going to take less to, in some cases, take less to render. So you can see this is at 1.16 milliseconds. So if you're trying to get your timings down, you can also change things by changing your timings. So this right here is 2048. You know, I could come back in here and knock this down to, let's get this maybe at like 1. So you can see now, because this is so small, this is having to do more work, and this is having to do more work just to generate that texture out. So if I gave this a more higher res texture coming out of this, let's say that we came out of here at like this, so now maybe I could bring this down to here, and I could come in here and do things like, you know, reset timings and let it recalculate. And you give it a second and it will recalculate. So when you double click on these guys, something weird's happening right now. So if you're trying to adjust your timings, you can always adjust how you're outputting and what you're getting from this. So I'm gonna actually up this back up. And I'm gonna, there we go. So you can see I'm getting really high milliseconds on some of these, but that's okay. So I've got my normal maps working already. So for my normals, so I've got this set up and that's my normal. So what I want to be able to do is I'm just going to reuse pieces of my map. There's no point to keep making individual maps. So here for my specular, so for my specular color, I want to be able to take my transform node from here and just output this to my specular color. So that gives me my spec. That gives me my specular color. And actually I think that I want to turn down this repeating because it's starting to repeat way too much. So maybe go down with it. We might end up getting rid of it altogether because I really don't like what that's doing at this point. So let's delete that out and bring this back in. Yeah, I like that better. I like that, just the one by itself, and don't even need to do anything to it. So for specular, what I like to do is I'll use the same grayscale that I'm using already, but I'll come between the whatever node is coming out, and I'll come right here and let's maybe get a levels. So there's a LVL, which is my levels. The thing I like about using the level in between this is that I can actually change the level of my specularity and get a different output from the same nodes. So this same node is now giving me a different output. And then let's just say glossiness. Now my glossiness is probably going to be not very glossy because I'm making denim, right? So let's say levels. So I'm going to make this where it's not super glossy. So if you see, if I come back towards black, if I come back over here and I'm pushing my histogram and you can see it actually has a lot of gloss to it. It's kind of reflective and shiny. So I want to kind of push this the other way. So maybe it has a little bit of specularity to it, but not a lot. So, and you see how the levels changes my image. So it can either push my image to be, you know, like this, or it can push it down to this. And I can do that with my levels. Now you can put levels on anything in between this too. I could put a levels right here. I could go right here and add a levels into this. And what this level will do is now it gives me a way to adjust kind of the brightness of this overall. And you can see that's actually changing my texture a little bit everywhere by doing that, which is interesting, right? Because I can get a different look out of this. And of course it's going to always add time to your timings and to your graph and everything else. So if you're trying to work and get specific timings of, you know, because the thing about it is that Substance can be used directly inside of most game engines. So Unity has a direct connection for Substance, and so does Unreal, and I believe that CryEngine does, and I also know that Marmoset, which is a real-time renderer for game graphics, has it as well. So I can see right now everything looks good. I'm probably going to let's just make this a little bit larger here. So I'm kind of happy with that overall. I want to break up that texture a little bit more. There's my dirt. I'm going to break this up even more. I'm just going to go in here and get, let's say the grunge. I'm going to drag this grunge in here, drop it down, and then use this as the mask between the two. So now I've got a little bit more randomness going on. I don't know how I like that. I don't think that's gonna work. Let's use another dirt, or maybe maybe this clouds. Let's see what clouds will do for us. It looks like it's so. I don't think it's doing much of anything because of this levels right here. It's really not doing much else. All right. So I've kind of got my normals and everything else coming out of this. So now let's work on the color portion of this. So for color, I'm going to go ahead and, no, I don't want a directional blur. I'm going to go ahead and get a blend node, and I'm going to go in here and get a CLR, which is color, which is uniform color, and I'm going to get an HSL, which is hue, saturation, and lightness. So for my color, you can see I can come in here and pick a random, I can pick a color. So I can come in here and pick a color from the interface, or I can pick a color from this image because I have it sitting on top of this. So now this is my color. And then to get this variation, you'll see that there's lighter parts, there's darker parts. So there's really a lot of different things going on, but there's really kind of two shades going on in here. There's a base color and a highlight color. So I'm gonna actually go back and repick this. I want this to be my brightest color. So let's say this is gonna be like, here's my brightest color. And then if I run this into HLC, or HSL rather, if I run this into a hue, saturation, and lightness, you can see that I can actually change the saturation values coming out of this. So I could come in here and say lightness and turn down the lightness of this, and that gives me my darker shade for this exact color. So what that does is this. I'm going to break off some things. So I'm going to take, let's see what I want to take. I'm going to take these guys here, and duplicate them. So I just selected them and hit Control D to duplicate them. It's pretty simple. So I've got these, got this, got this. So I'm going to blend this, and I want to blend this together with some color. So I've got this going on, and I'm going to use this blend. I'm going to use this as an opacity. So now I've got my background color, which is going to be the darker, and then my lighter color will be the lighter one, will be the foreground color. So I could make another color, or I can just do this, just grab the color output and drag it in here. So you'll see what's happening is that I'm using the same color to drive shadow and brightness. And what I show you in a second will make this make even more sense. So I'm going to double click on this blend node and see what I've got. And you'll see that's what we're getting. I'm getting a copy. So I'm going to say that I'm going to multiply these two together, or do an add sub or whatever. So right now I'm just basically using the two colors and getting those colors to kind of work together with each other. So